Hello, ladies and gentlemen. A warm welcome to today's seminar, a cooperation between Arena ED and the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung, the Nordic office of the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung here in Stockholm. Today's seminar is Artificial Intelligence and the World of Work. We'll be discussing several elements of the use of artificial intelligence in everyday work, as it's one of the key drivers of the digitalization process at the moment, which is leading to structural change at the workplace. New professions and skills are becoming more important, making old professions and skills obsolete and redundant. One of the key drivers of this development are artificial intelligence applications, or AI, that are defined by algorithms. These AI applications are for many a new qualitative and quantitative step. Depending on their use, they can support workers and increase their productivity. But in some cases, there are fears that workers are increasingly working to the tune of the computer, of the algorithms. What does this mean for the world of work? Is the dystopian vision of workers reduced to cyborgs a not so distant future? Can AI be harnessed to the concept of decent work? And what do these developments mean for trade unions and the social partnership institutions? We'd like to discuss these and further questions in our seminar today. And these questions are also featured in a joint publication by the Friedrich-Ebert-Stiftung and Arena ED, Artificial Intelligence and the Future Digital Work Society, written by Thorben Albrecht and Christian Kellerman. We've asked the authors to join us today to put forward their views and their arguments based in their paper. I'd like to introduce today's panel. On the one hand, we have Thorben Albrecht and Christian Kellerman, the authors of the aforementioned study. Thorben Albrecht is currently Director of Policy with the IG Metall, the Metal Workers Union in Germany, and Christian Kellerman is Assistant Professor at the University of Applied Science in Berlin. And we've also two commentaries as well, one from Linda Larsson. Linda is digitalization expert with the Swedish Trade Union Confederation, LO. Thank you very much, Linda, for coming. And we've also asked Anne Kaun from the world of academia to comment on the presentation from Thorben and Christian. Anne is a professor with the Department for Media Culture at the Södertörn University in Stockholm. And is working in the area of digitalization and its social effects. And last but by no means least, Håkan Bengtsson, CEO of Arenagruppen, will wrap up today's session. Håkan will also post your questions in the discussion for you during the course of today's seminar. Now, I'd like Thorben and Christian to begin with their presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Philip. And thanks to the organizers, thanks to Arenagruppen and Håkan Bengtsson from Arena and Philip Bing from FAS Friedrich Ebert Foundation in Stockholm. It's a great pleasure to be in Stockholm, so to say. It's like coming home. The procedure today for the seminar is that Thorben and I, we will give alternating inputs because we also wrote this paper together, and luckily the parts build upon each other so that we can interchange our parts. And we're going to pick out a few key points from our paper. The paper, why we wrote it, is about technological impact assessment. It's kind of a technical term, and we focus it on digitization in general and artificial intelligence in particular. You can say digitization has accelerated the transformation of labor, and it corresponds with a couple of other new trends, like, of course, new forms of globalization, of demographic development, and the shift in working people's values. But digitization is accelerating all these trends in a certain degree. We focus on AI, even as many of you think and also know, this term is very toxic to talk about artificial intelligence. But it marks, for our understanding and how we digged into the stage of digitization with terms of AI, that it marks a new stage of digitization. We use it, or we use the term AI as a collective term for algorithms which can process large volumes of data, which is capable of learning and which has the ability to self-optimize in an unsupervised version. This does not by any means mean that we talk about intelligent technology, but this is how we define it and use it, and how it is also used in the working context. We see a lot of applications of AI systems in the work context, which can organize, which can manage, which can control labor, which can create a high degree of self-organization and optimization of business and labor relationships. And this is why we think it requires a new adaptation or an adaptation of the regulatory framework, as well as an update of labor relations, which Thorben will talk about in the last part. And for that matter, and to have a holistic approach to technological impact assessment, we think this is the main one of the key points of our paper. We need a number of levels and dimensions which need to be taken into account for technological impact assessment, unlike, for example, a very linear or single application technological impact assessment. The first level we say is technology itself. What is the technological or technical potential of AI, which is hard enough to answer, of course. The second level is the workplace itself. Thorben will elaborate on that. How is AI used in the concrete situations, and what are the related changes and effects? And the third dimension is a macroeconomic view on the level of employment, which might change to AI-related automation effects. And fourth, we will draw what would be the political action needed to steer the digitization process so that we can end up with decent work for most and for many. I begin with level one, the technology itself, make it as short as possible. We think that, or let's say, as a definition, data algorithms and very fast computers shake up the tech frontier. And this is not new, it's for roughly a decade now, and still AI is often a question of faith, believe in it or not. It's a big divide among laymen and professionals, but also amongst professionals themselves. So some say it's only Excel on speed, and some say it's some form of beginning of super intelligence. For us, as we grab the technology, it's a working tool, or på svenska verktyg, or på tyska verktyg. So it's not magic stuff. It's a tool, and the status quo is that AI algorithms are good, but they're not perfect. They easily or quickly reach the limits of computability. They reach, by that matter, limits of their applicability. But however, often they're still good enough to outperform humans in certain tasks. And potential applications are therefore foreseeable, but not often there yet. So we're talking about pretty much about the future. However, machine learning, as you know, I don't have to define that, but machine learning has many use cases today and can control cross-sectional tasks in enterprises. But what's so special about machine learning today? Well, we observe a higher level recognition of actions. So not only from strings and points and single digits to like recognizing a picture, but even from the picture we see the possibility of machine learning algorithms to recognize rather complex situations. So the pattern recognition abilities climbing up the ladder, you can say, to the real world, or closer to the real world. The same is true for handling extremely large data volumes, which was always a problem, it still is. But we are approaching a little bit, we're getting closer to real world situations and not only very controlled environments where usually algorithms are making a difference. Machine learning uses examples, makes observations, draws conclusions, and allows to transfer solutions to comparable situations, like, for example, a lightweight robot in Australia might be a learning tool, so might learn and give the information and this learning input to a lightweight robot in a city in Europe or so. It might optimize a turbine. It might, we know all about the examples of target-specific advertising, about people analytics, enterprise resource planning, and so on and so forth. So these tools are getting more and more advanced. What's the key element? The key element is the rising precision of predictability by these tools, and this reduces future uncertainty. And so it, of course, has a huge, tremendous incentive to use it for production, for administration, for service, for agriculture, and the latest case is, of course, medical sector and the pharmaceutical sector in the context of coronavirus. The key analytical problem for us and for many who are dealing with technological impact assessment is that AI is hard to gauge and hard to measure, to differentiate, or to differ from other software and inputs in the digital sector. So it's hard to quantify. But however, when you read all the textbooks from AI developers, you see that the main motivation of their work is actually to complete automation of economically important jobs. So we do see this impact of conquering the field of work. However, there are many restrictions regarding methods to like achieve this goal, but this is one of the key motivations. This is why I think it is necessary, or we think it's necessary, to take a deeper look at this specific technology. Let me now pass over to Thorben, because the limits are his task. Thorben.
Thank you very much. I think, of course, we know what AI can do and what it cannot do, but this is very fluid at the moment. And our thesis is that it's really a qualitative change in the world of work, because other digital tools were merely helping people to make their tasks, or sometimes also, of course, replacing workers in their tasks. But AI, and Christian already mentioned it, can organize work. It can steer workers, and it can control work and workers. And this is really a new quality of digital, the digital instrument at the workplace. And the examples we already can see is from organizing logistics to chatbots and customer relations management, where digital tools talk themselves to customers, but also a lot of tasks in the human resources management, when we talk about people analytics, when we talk about hiring people through a process where AI makes some, at least, pre-decisions who to hire. And we also have seen cases where AI was firing workers. In most European countries, probably not legal without any human interference, but there are examples in other countries where we can see that. But the question, what effect AI will have, of course, depends on whether it is really applied in the company and on the whether the business case is working. And if you look only at the technological possibilities, this is not enough from our perspective. When we ask whether AI is really introduced in the companies, I think there are at least 3 questions to be asked. The first, of course, is what is AI able to do? So the technological abilities and limitations are one feature that is important when a company decides whether to use AI or not. But it's not only what is AI able to do, but what is AI allowed to do. So a regulatory framework, laws, but also collective agreements, workers' voice do play a role when the question is asked, can we use AI in our company? And the third question is even more complicated, because it's asking, does AI pay off? And that means not only, well, AI can replace this number of workers, so productivity is going up, but it's really if AI fits into the work processes that are determined by the humans working there, and is it really improving the productivity of the workers in practice, or it's just a theoretical mathematical analysis that it might help. To make it even more difficult, these 3 parameters are interdependent and extremely fluid. Of course, the technology is changing due to new inventions, due to new technologies, but with AI, there's a second dimension, that the programs used, the technology used, is changing by itself, because it's learning, it's adapting, and it's improving in the process. So the technological boundaries are extremely fluid. Same is true for the regularity framework, because we can see in a lot of countries that the first laws about AI, especially AI in the workplace, be it in a national framework or in a European level, as well as collective agreements about the use of AI, are just in the starting phase. So this regulatory environment is also changing at the moment. And the way we use AI is only also effective if it fits into the business models, and business models at the moment are also changing a lot. So we have three factors that are fluid in themselves and interdependent from each other. That makes it very difficult to tell what effects AI will have on the number of jobs, of the number of cases where it's really used. And I will give this uncertainty back to Christian to tell us anyhow to what we think are the effects on the labor markets and on incomes, etc. Christian, go ahead.
Yes, I go ahead. That's the third level, or the third dimension of our technological impact assessment, is the macroeconomic level. What effects would AI have on the level of employment? Well, like others, or like many researchers out there, we are not convinced of extreme scenarios, either be it high level of technological unemployment or like job miracles as an effect of digitization. The things we say are we think are a lot more complicated and need to be assessed according to the complexity of the issue. One level of complexity was already mentioned by Thorben right now. And you all know the scenario by Fry Osborne on technological unemployment. They don't get better even if they are updated. But anyway, it's a very, very stubborn scenario out there. There are large spreads in the scenarios regarding employment effects, and depending on a number of factors. So how far can or could AI reach out to tasks, manual tasks, cognitive tasks? How complex or fine-grained is our perspective on what a person does in his or her job? And then there's the bigger side, bigger picture, even on the supply side or the demand side. So many variables, complex models for a rather abstract, worlds, but we're talking about the real world. Two big camps are out there. Dystopians thinking machine learning is intelligent enough to not only take over routine tasks, routine cognitive tasks, but also beyond, so creative cognitive tasks. And that's more the dystopian. For others, it's also utopian, but maybe it's a little bit useless to have this kind of camp thinking. But utopians often think that when it comes to employment effects, that machine learning is a productivity booster in lead sectors and will lead to higher sectoral competitiveness with a lead to stronger growth in the overall economy. So even in non or under digitized sectors, which will have a positive effect on new jobs and new income. And we label this scenario a Pareto optimum 4.0 scenario, where everything is going to be all right. It's not so probable that everything is going to be all right. Our argument, along with a couple of researchers such as Darren Ashimoglu or David Orter, Anton Korinek, Joseph Stieglitz, or Anna Salomons, is that there are some displacement effects, and there might be outnumbering effects on the labor market. So there might be job growth, for example, in digitized sectors due to high productivity, especially when it's the building up phase, when you build up digital infrastructure in a company on the shop floor. And even prices might fall of products, of services due to higher productivity, but there's no automatic spillover mechanism of these effects onto other sectors or branches. This is our key argument, or also the key argument of the researchers I mentioned. And the crucial factor is speed or time, or you can even say concurrency. So if labor is replaced by technology faster than new labor is created, then it's obviously that technology replaces work. There might be no increase in labor demand in other sectors necessarily created, and digitization might result, after all, in sinking average wages when you take into account this time factor as a substitution effect, leads to decreased labor demand. And even if higher wages would materialize, it would not mean that this would transfer to new purchasing or consumption activities, since the nature of demand needs to be modeled in such a complex macroeconomic model. So it really depends on which income group at the end of the day would profit from higher wages, because we all know about the propensity of spending when it comes to incomes. The empirics today is that higher qualified people or workers do actually profit from digitization. There's a flexible demand for their products, and there's a quite inflexible labor supply in the areas they work. So we know, på tyska säger vi Facharbeitermangel, also special workers, the lack of expert workers. And the picture changes on the lower end of qualifications, where the demand for manual tasks is relatively inflexible, and lower prices for manual activities do not lead to a substantially higher demand. So this is why we think in like very basic macroeconomic terms, but if you put this in a complex model, it looks like we are already observing a polarization in the workforce, and that digitization has a tremendous potential to increase this polarization effect. This is why we call this scenario polarization 4.0, and think this is very probable if this is not regulated or steered against. And this is where I would like to hand over to Thorben again.
Thank you, Christian. And I'm trying to go back now from the macro level back onto the company and shop floor level, and for trade unions and workers' representatives to make it a bit more feasible and possible to judge AI in the workplace. We try to put up some categories, not about what kind of AI are we talking about, what are the technical mechanisms, but rather how it is applied in the workplace. And we have a first level called A and a second level called B. And the first level is about workers using AI as a tool. And the first category would then be A1, which means workers use AI as a tool that helps them, but they still have the control over the processes and final decisions. The second category on the A level with the workers would be A2, meaning that parts of the work of workers, or all parts of them, are taken over by AI, and decisions are taken over by AI. The third category would then be on the B level, and the B level for us is the managerial level. That is when AI takes over management tasks. And there again, we can distinguish between B1, which means that human resource departments or other managerial staff are supported by AI in their decisions. And the second category here would be B2, meaning that AI takes over decisions itself, managerial decisions, as I said, about hiring people, about firing people. So we can see a different impact growing from A1 to B2, which means for Works Council that they can be a bit more relaxed about the A1 use cases, but they should really take a close look when AI takes over managerial functions. And these categories might help Works Councils and trade unions to see and look what they have to do about the implication of AI, and when they might even say no to the implication of AI in the workplace. And this could also help to, when we talk about 4 fields of action we describe in our paper that are crucial and build on each other when we really want to steer the impact of AI in a direction that is good for workers and that is good for quality jobs and a humane workplace. This 4 levels of action, as we call them, is a suitable political regulatory framework. I won't go into detail here because time's short, but it's about the question which data of workers are used and it may be even sold to other companies. It's about which rights do trade unions and works councils, other representation bodies have when it comes to implementation of AI in the workplace. So that is what is done by law. The second level is the question of transparency. Transparency about the goals and functionality of AI. This is, I think, very crucial for the acceptance of AI applications in the workplace by workers. But at the same time, it's very difficult because we have a black box problem here. Sometimes even the goals, but very often at least the functionality of AI is not clear, even to the management which is introducing it. And it's also changing, the functionalities are changing during the work process. So we have a problem here with transparency, at least unless we see some explanation functions being built into AI. And there are some researchers working on that, that we at least can understand why AI comes to certain decisions. Apart from the political framework and the transparency, a third level for us, of course, is workers' voice and workers' representations, or as we call it in Germany, co-determination about the application of AI. Workers need to have a strong voice to agree or disagree if and how AI should be used in a workplace. And there again, we have a problem that usually in a collective agreement, you can agree to use a certain tool and then your job is more or less done, also a digital tool. But that is not the case with AI. As AI is changing itself, a trade union cannot say yes to the application of a technique and then lean back and say everything's in order. But there have to be supervision mechanisms and regular consultations between management and trade unions. So a collective agreement or company level agreement can put a certain framework, but we need a more agile form of co-determination and workers' voice here too. And even if this approach of a process are not completely new to trade unions, I think it can also lead to a new role for trade unions, because knowledge about AI is very scarce, and a workers' representation body in a company might not have the knowledge. But I think trade unions have to build up this knowledge and then can advise works council or other shop stewards, etc. They can also think about certifying certain AI applications and make sure that only good ones are used in the workplace. And of course, a very important issue is to qualify workers, that they really can understand how AI works, what it means for them working with AI. And of course, we need qualifications if workers lose their jobs and have to go to another job or another level of qualification to supervise AI and work with AI rather than the tasks they did before that might be replaced by AI. So these 4 levels of action contribute to what we call a new social framework for AI in the workplace. And we strongly argue that this framework is needed. To keep control of the impact of AI on workers, we need a strong social framework, and we cannot leave technological dynamics to themselves. We need a framework, and we need strong trade unions and workers' voice to control it and make it usable for better jobs and more jobs in the future. They don't come by themselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, that was very interesting. And I personally think that your analysis and your papers is a nice difference to the often heated debate on the issue of artificial intelligence. It's either up or it's down, but your paper and your view, I think, is very down to earth. Thank you for that. I'd now like to bring in our experts, and I'll begin with Linda Larsson from LO to have a Swedish union perspective on the ideas. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip, and thank you so much for. It's a great pleasure to be here and discuss these very interesting topics today. And also, thanks for publishing this report. I'm not going to go into detail about the report as such. I think the authors did quite a good job doing that already. But it's, as you said, Philip, it's a very good, lays a very solid and well-balanced foundation for progressive discussions on these topics, which is very, very helpful, since Christian also mentioned there is a very vivid palette of ideas and expert views out there on this matter already. With that being said, my few minutes I'd like to dedicate to the last part, and the 4 fields of action. I guess it shouldn't come as a surprise, coming from the trade union perspective, that I'm also going to emphasize the trade union perspective in this. I think that on this matter in general, I mean, I wouldn't say it's been left to the developers and the people in research on AI for a long time now, but there's also a very big divide between this group and then I would say not the general public, but the rest of the world, so to say, us. Not least the trade union, whose everyday life this technology is obviously going to impact. So I think that there's a general perspective or problem in the debate, that we have this divide between the people working with these issues and the people who are gonna be working with these issues when AI hits the workplace, so to say. And so I think we need a greater understanding. We need to have a better view on how we need to integrate all these different views in the general debate on AI, not just the workers' representatives, but there is a lot of other clever minds that need to be integrated in this debate, this general debate on AI. And the reason why it's such a pressing matter for trade unions, because I fully agree with the report, and this shouldn't be any news. This should just be something very natural, actually, when we talk about technology in general and implementation at the workplace. But I think that also for the labor movement, it is a big problem to integrate the labor aspect of this when talking about AI. And so that's why I also really like the report, because the fact is that regardless of who is developing this technology, the fact is that digitalization, if we're going to view it as a process in which it should be seen as, the digitalization happens at the workplace, and so the workforce, the employees are in the center of the digitalization process. So they are the key actors that we really need to bring into this process. And a good thing is that the social partners on the European level have recently made an agreement on digitalization, where they have agreed on a process, a working process, from the implementation phase to actually it's sort of a wheel, a non-stopping wheel that's supposed to be. So it's constant work in progress, and this is, as Thorben also mentioned, this is how we have to view this. This is how we have to take it on also at the workplace. So I have great hopes for this model to be a role model, not only in the workplaces, but also for how we view the work around AI in general. There's obvious reasons why the workers should be included and obviously we don't have to go into detail why the workers should have their say in also in new technology, but I want to point to another 2 areas where I think it's really crucial, especially when it comes to AI, and it's you mentioned that in the paper as well. It's one thing is the silent knowledge that the profession is carrying with them, the non-formalized knowledge. And when you're going to transfer things you have done physically or in other with other technology before into AI, you have to make sure that these values and this knowledge is brought in. And this is very hard. And as you argue in the text, this is very hard. This is something that AI is not good at. And this is a true challenge, because if the tools that are supposed to be good for us, or to say the AI tools are going to be good for us, they also need to be equipped with this sort of knowledge. And the only ones that has this knowledge is obviously the professionals. So this is why the workers are the key. key role in so many ways to make sure that the AI that is implemented is not done just in the best way, but it's also the best possible AI. And because we can't have tools that are not based on our values, not based on our normal values just being implemented, it's going to disrupt our whole way of thinking and working. It's also going to affect our societies as such. So this is why it's so important to find a bridge between how to transfer the values into the technology. And I think this is where the workers have a key role. And I really hope that we could start to discuss about this more. I think my time is probably running out now, so I think I'm going to stop there, and I hope that I could continue on in the discussion session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Linda. Just to our viewers out there, if you have any questions, please write them down in the chat on the Arena website, Facebook site, and Håkan will collect them and we will bring them into the discussion. So please don't be shy. Our next commentary is from Anne Kaun. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Also, thank you, Christian and Thorben. And I also want to congratulate you on a great paper, bringing these very heated and speculative discussions on technology change and radical disruptions down to earth, and really showing the realities and potential changes that we are facing with artificial intelligence. So that's really an important step that you are taking away from this kind of future-oriented socio-technical imaginaries that are circulating out there that are very speculative. And I have, in my comment, because it was very inspiring to read your paper, some thoughts, and would like to hear more your ideas about two aspects in the discussion of how AI is changing the work and work relationships. And I would like to start with maybe the question of regulation that you already mentioned as one field of activities or areas where, you know, suggestions can come in on how to impact the implementation of artificial intelligence in the workplace and how to regulate it. And there, as far as I understood it, there's a discussion between having kind of global ideas, general ethics and general forms of regulation for artificial intelligence, which are kind of countered with arguments on having sector-specific regulation. So that there's a difference between automation, artificial intelligence, the use in industry applications, for example, compared to maybe public administration, where artificial intelligence is also used. So maybe you can, in the Q&A, also say a little bit more about sector-specific forms of regulation, and if there are different implications, and also if the impact should be assessed differently for different sectors, or if it's more important to have a kind of a global idea of what artificial intelligence is doing with work and workers' relations. So this is my first point. And then the second point, I think that's very important in your paper, that you have a very grounded view on how the future prospect of work is going to look like. So you're neither following in the trap of the utopian or the dystopian kind of discussion, but you're still focusing on questions of numbers, like how many jobs will potentially disappear, how many new jobs might appear. But there's also, I mean, with automation that have we seen in history before, it's not only the question of numbers, of absolute numbers, but it's also the structure of work, the kind of skills that are necessary. And you're talking about the tacit knowledge that also Linda pointed at, and empathy, emotional labor that's important, that can't be really automated. But a part of automation is also, or necessary for artificial intelligence as we know it today, is that certain tasks have to be standardized to a very high degree. And in that sense, the work of the workers, even if they remain in their jobs, is also changing. It's a structural change of their everyday tasks that has to be adjusted to technology so that artificial intelligence actually can work. So this idea of de-skilling and the idea of humanely extended automation, where it's not the question if the machines are serving us, but how workers are serving machines, and in that sense serve artificial intelligence. And we have seen some examples of jobs that have emerged with automation and artificial intelligence. So I'm thinking here of Amazon warehouses and workers in these warehouses that are becoming extensions of automation, of technology, but also content moderation of social media platforms, where artificial intelligence is not intelligent enough to interpret certain content. So where we have to have human content moderators who are also taking this very standardized forms of labor and very low-skilled, categorizing content and pictures to produce training data for artificial intelligence. So these are, it's like not the actual number of employment and jobs, but it's also structural change in terms of skills. And not only that maybe emotional labor and empathy is necessary, but also this kind of very de-skilled forms of employment that make the application of artificial intelligence possible in the first place. So this is also something that I would like to hear more about, and your reflections about these forms of de-skilling that potentially emerge with automation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anna. Thank you. I have a question as well before I let you answer the commentaries we just heard. I'd like to know what are the organizational implications of artificial intelligence in the world of the unions. I mean, obviously, the unions have to restructure themselves and have to face the challenges. I mean, we're talking about pretty complex systems. So will we be seeing more software engineers on the union side in the negotiations on tariff agreements or collective agreements? How can we be sure that if workers are to have a larger influence on the issue of introducing or taming artificial intelligence at the workplace, how do we ensure that they have knowledge to actually know and understand how artificial intelligence works? Because I surely don't have that. Yeah, so please go ahead.
Can I answer first, or is it the, yep. No, I think that definitely, of course, this is a whole new area. I mean, and it differs in so many ways to other types of technology in that sense, that we also need to, of course, get the skills we need to be able to handle it properly. And I think that definitely we will have to have more technical competence in the future, but we're often so locked to the technical issues that we forget about the soft issues, what we as trade unions are good at, what we do in the first place. We don't have to understand everything. So I think that yes, we need this competence, obviously, but for the people working in the workplace and their representatives, it might not always be the deep technical skills that are needed. They need the trade union skills. They need to know what to negotiate and how. This is their task that they have had all along, and so I see it as an extension, but it's of course widening and deepening the knowledge of what are the issues regarding this technique. And of course, when it comes to upskilling in general, when it comes to handling new technology, of course the employers it's their workforce. They need to take the responsibility for also making sure that their workforce is capable, and it's not going to be only due to letting people go and finding new, more qualified people. It has to be with classical upskilling. And also, of course, trade unions, I think we also, from our perspective, needs to upgrade our skills, obviously. And that is silent work that is underway right now. I think trade unions in general are now tapping into this area, trying to understand it and trying to prepare themselves for what is coming, so to say. Yeah.
Thorben, can I bring you in for your IG Metall perspective on this?
Yeah, sure. Definitely, the trade unions have to build up this knowledge, and it does play a role. But that doesn't mean necessarily to hire software engineers. I think you need the people who understand the work processes, workers' interests, but also understand the technique. And of course, you have to be able to talk to the tech people. And this is challenging. We have seen this with robotics before, and I remember talking to a CEO of a robot company from Germany, KUKA, for 45 minutes about the cooperation between the eye and the hand with humans and robots, and trying to understand what's really going on there. You need some knowledge, and but I think it's not only on the negotiation table, and I think that is something. What Linda described very good was that you have been the developers who develop things, and then it hits the workplace. The question really is, we don't have this in our paper because I'm not completely there yet, but my thoughts also go into a direction. Don't we need trade unions already when developing workplace AI? To make sure that there's no bias, no discrimination, but also other issues are thought into the systems from the very beginning. I think this is the line of thinking which we have to develop as trade unions as well. If I may, also on the question of de-skilling and skills required in the future. I'm not sure there will be low skill skills or low skill jobs that will stay and that will maybe even grow. But I'm not sure if they are all there to stay. If I think about an Amazon warehouse, I would completely agree. The humans working there are an extension of the machine, and that is not what we want to. But maybe it's only a question of time whether there will be people at all working in warehouses. And we can see some other cases as well. And I think AI will train itself also different ways in the near future than we see today. And then there are certain examples where I think we really have to say no to what's happening. At least the way it is done now. And if I think about labor platforms, that is very often the case, which also leads to de-skilling. But I also want to stress the positive examples. I've seen a project where care workers in hospitals and elderly homes were asked. And there, if technology takes over a lot of the reporting that has to be done, of looking whether people are drinking and what amount of water they are drinking, they'd be very happy to leave this to technology and do more of the real care work. And I think that are examples that really show how we can also improve jobs through technology. Of course, we need to, we have a transition there, and we have to make sure that all workers have the chance to require the new skills, and probably in most cases higher skills that are required there. But also I think that we do have a choice in which fields we use technology and in which cases we also say no. And I think saying no is also sometimes a job of the trade unions. And I'm not arguing here for trying to prevent productivity gains or to prevent new technologies, but we have to have a choice whether to apply them or not.
Christian, would you like to respond to the comments?
Yes, thank you very much. And thanks for the fantastic comments. They're very challenging. Let me pick out the comment by Linda on value transfer into technology. It's a tricky point. We always are a little bit stuck with this one because on the one hand, the productivity side of AI systems is based on the feature that it works automatically, more or less automatically, that it evaluates data or works with data and doesn't need any much work, human work, to optimize a result, a solution for a certain problem. So this black box phenomenon. If you talk to programmers, if you are going into the coding community, this is always the big challenge to get away from actually programming certain applications by hand and having things done automatically due to the evaluation of data or big data. When using big data, you always end up with biases, this garbage in, garbage out phenomenon. And just discuss this topic in the context of a easy mutual learning program when it comes to gender bias in algorithms used in human resource context. There have been a couple of cases which have been very scandalous, using big data and coming up with a very gender biased result. So not a very optimal result. Also for the company who used this algorithm, it wasn't really optimal. They were looking for something else. So they just got what they always had, but they were looking for someone else, but what they got was a white male. Anyway, point is, if you open up the black box and if you work by hand, it all gets so extremely expensive and time consuming that it's not productive anymore. And that's where this trade-off always, as far as I understand, the overall technology comes in, that it's very tricky to convert values on the data level into algorithms. It shouldn't be excluded, but this is one of the biggest or trickiest issues when it comes to optimizing or like neutralizing the functionality of algorithms. Yeah. A second point is which Anne was mentioning when it comes to sector-specific questions of regulation. I once had the chance to talk to a leading person in a big German car manufacturer, and this person was saying that if we wanted, we could automate a lot more of the work processes here, which you can see in the various shop floors and the various fields of car production. But we don't do it because there's resistance against it, and there's works councils and others who don't want this, and we don't. And still, it's a matter of what Thorben mentioned in the second part. It's a matter of factor prices. So at the end of the day, it would be too costly. Still, it might change when, as said, programming becomes more automized. However, so the degree or the level of automation could be much higher already. So this is one reaction to your point, Anne, when it comes to sector-specific regulation, that we already have functioning sector-specific regulation in the context of co-determination, or in the German system at least. It might be the same or similar in Sweden or other Nordic countries. The impact assessment of these specific fields which might be automized, that's the point which we try to lift up from this linear perspective, which you usually have on the technological implementation in a working process, up to a higher level. So it doesn't really make sense from our point of view to have this very narrow sectoral point of very sectoral technological impact perspective. You need to have it, but you need to abstract it onto the macroeconomic level. Otherwise, because we cannot think, or we cannot just see that there might be this automatic spillover effects, which I mentioned. So there might be effects from one small field to a bigger field of perspective, and in the economy and on employment. That's why it does make a lot of sense to have a differentiated perspective on technological impact assessment, and we need to have it, and we still need to have it. But our plea was to say we need to abstract it, or we need to model it on the higher level.
Hey, thank you. Håkan, it's almost, I'm afraid we're running out of time. Håkan, this is your chance to do a wrap up of this very complex discussion we had. I wish you a lot of luck, but I'd like to say first of all that thank you very much for participating and for having time. And to the viewers out there, you can access the papers on the Arena website and also on the website of the Färdigheter-Stiftung, fes.de, in English and in Swedish on the Arena website. Håkan, it's your show. You're muted, Håkan.
Sorry. Thank you very much for an interesting discussion over an important paper from Thorben and Christian. I found this German-Swedish exchange of experience and discussion is very important in many ways. I think maybe Germany is a bit ahead of Swedes in terms of understanding what AI means, and in a way I think we're in the beginning of a learning process where this seminar and this report could be a start for us. AI is called in German künstliche Intelligenz, which in my ears sounds a bit more poetic. And you write in this essay that I find the main message for the future, which is based on the historical experience, of course, that AI and other technological change is not fallen from the sky down to earth. It all depends on how we make it work, how we implement it in society and the work life. I think Germany and Sweden has some advantages here. We have different models in terms of implementing in the work life. In Germany, you have this system of co-determination, which was more structured. The Swedish experience is union employers negotiation, where we have to agree on certain things, etc. It differs, but it's all based on experience from the 70s, which still lingers on. And this, in my world, is important tools to make AI work and contribute to a fair society and good work, or at least make it as good as possible, which is the best we can do always. So thank you very much to Christian and Thorben and Anne and Linda for interesting comments and for the discussions. And of course to FES and Philip and his team for making this seminar possible. I think the discussion continues and the learning process is just starting. So stay tuned and stay safe. Thank you.
Bye-bye.